Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Film Frauds. For myself, Matt, and my co-host Mark
Hello.
and Tyler.
Hello.
Providing completely unprofessional and 100% biased opinions on movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear. But today, our eyes are like this because they're wide shut. Because that's what we're talking about. Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut. Mark, you have a bit of a history with this movie. Would you care to explain it?
Yes, I was the one who proposed that we watch it for the podcast. And I watched this film for the first time in, I think, May of 2020. And I was, at that time, I was going through like a Kubrick binge and I was going through the whole filmography. And after Eyes Wide Shut, I didn't know what to make of it. It's a kind of a complex, it's a pretty complex film. There's a lot going on. And I there's not a lot of I couldn't find a lot of good discussion online, and so for the past year I've been sort of like poking you guys to watch it, and um and so I watched it for the second time 2 days ago, and I think I had a better grip on the movie. The first time I was kind of like completely overwhelmed, but this time I think I had I was able to figure out a few more things, and I don't know if I had a better experience or a worse experience, but I really I still have that I was still captivated by it in the same sense that I did the first time, where I was like the dream sequences almost. And so I've watched it 2 times now. And Tyler, I think this is your second time as well.
Yeah, I watched it. I mean, you basically pestered us into watching it, and I gave in. I think in October, I think was the first time I actually like sat around. Was like, okay, I'm gonna try this, and I was like horribly bewildered the first time. Like, I have no idea. I had no idea what to make about the second time. And I got to be honest, I still have no idea what to make of this movie the second time through. There's a lot more stuff that I remember, like issues with it that I think I have more problems with on a second time through. But it's weird. I have a very weird relationship with this movie where I still have no idea how I feel about it. Even after 2 times through, I don't know how much I love, like, or dislike. And I was like, I'm using this like discussion because I imagine Matt's going to probably be on the lower end just based on Matt's history of not liking movies. So I don't know. I'm curious about this movie. I was gonna use this discussion as like a way to figure it out.
This is my favorite movie ever made.
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't really know how to feel about this movie, to be honest.
Yeah. I think
I have an argument. That it's worse than my favorite Kubrick movies, that I think has some sort of semblance of logic to it. But
wait, can you say that again? Okay, can you
wait?
What
did you say?
Yeah, what did you say?
I think I have like a logic that can justify why I think this movie is worse than some of my favorite Kubrick films.
What Kubrick movies have you seen? Just I feel like
I have seen The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Spartacus,
Clockwork Orange.
Jacket,
Clockwork Orange,
with the war one, with
Dr. Strangelove.
No, Dr. Strangelove is one of them, and then the
Clockwork Orange.
I've seen Clockwork Orange too, but the other war one, which I can't think of.
You said Full Metal Jacket.
No, the one with the Douglas.
Spartacus. Paths of Glory.
Yeah, Paths of Glory. So I've seen 7 Kubrick, eight now.
Right.
I've seen 8 Kubrick. That's like way more than I thought I'd seen.
Yeah, damn.
And I think that I like this one the least of all of them.
Wow.
But there's like but it has one of my favorite scenes, I guess, in a Kubrick film too.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay. I think this film is there's a lot to be said about the making of the film and Kubrick's ideas of the film, because in the book, the Stanley Kubrick Archives, which Tyler has a copy there, Stanley said this was his best film by far.
Yeah.
He was very proud of this. Everything, he was so meticulous about this film. Everything, all the colors, all the set pieces, the walls, the material that was used for the walls and everything. He was like on top of all of that. And it was like one of the longest productions in like, I can't remember what the studio who produced it was, but it was like one of the longest productions in history, only rivaled by Lawrence of Arabia's production.
Yeah.
And, this is not my favorite Kubrick film. I'm really not sure where this lands. It's sort of like hovering above that list, and I'm not sure where it's going to plop down.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know how to place this film. And I'm very interested by the fact that Kubrick says it's his best film. I don't know. I just can't. I can't bring myself to agree at all.
Is there like actual like audio recording of him saying it, or is it just
There's
yeah,
interview
he said
There's,
she
transcripts.
said?
interview transcripts and stuff like that.
Oh,
He,
okay.
he like before
Yes.
he died, but his Kubrick with this movie was notorious. He did not want his movies to premiere in film festivals. And this was the one exception, or not one, but I think one of the few exceptions he made, where he let this movie premiere at Venice Film Festival because he was so proud of it. He's like, this is like the best thing I've ever made. And I know he died like very shortly after this came out, like a few
He
months
died
after.
before it premiered. He died before.
He died
Yeah.
before it premiered. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
okay,
yeah, he died before. That's why there's some controversy as to whether or not this is like his cut or something.
yeah.
Well, apparently it's the same cut he showed his family.
Yeah.
I do know that there's like a lot of weird stuff with this movie. Like, admittedly, like there's like this movie's ripe for like conspiracy theory and controversy and everything like that. And
Yeah.
I think there's definite like arguments for it, clearly. And I mean, it's Kubrick. And if for people watching, if you're somehow not familiar with who Kubrick is, if you think of just David Fincher's notorious for having so meticulous and hundreds of takes, and he's that kind of guy. Kubrick inspired David Fincher. Kubrick's the original Fincher, if to kind of like contextualize it a little bit. And you can definitely feel that. You hear that in the interviews. Kubrick wanted like a married couple at the start for this movie.
Like in real life America.
Like a real life married couple, which is why he got Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, which again, Tom Cruise continues to fascinate me considering he's worked with like every single amazing director. It's like a certain point we were watching this, you're like, Tom Cruise is in a Kubrick movie and he's like,
Yeah.
good.
He was a big star at the time too.
This
He
was
was a big star.
was 99 the year he also had Magnolia too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this
He
is
was
like
on fire.
so this is clearly like there's a lot here and we could spend hours dissecting it about like its hidden
Yes.
meanings. But Matt was like, I gotta go at 10:30. So we don't
yeah.
have an hours.
We have 40 minutes to talk, so it's plenty of time to get a bunch of stuff.
I have a question and
Yes.
a proposal to, that I want you guys to play with, I guess. That's a weird terminology, but you'll see what I mean in a second. So there's an interview I remember watching. It's on YouTube somewhere, and it was like a Stanley Kubrick remembered documentary, and it was a part where Steven Spielberg was talking, and Spielberg and Kubrick were close friends, and I believe it was Spielberg who picked up the AI project from Kubrick and tried to finish it to the best of to Kubrick's vision, I guess. But what Steven Spielberg said was that Kubrick wanted to push the film form. He really wanted to push it.
Yeah.
And Spielberg said, like, all right, Stanley, what about 2001: A Space Odyssey? And Stanley said, that was close, but I wasn't quite there. So Spielberg didn't really talk about Eyes Wide Shut, but I want to like keep this in mind. What do you think? Do you think Kubrick pushed film form a little further with Eyes Wide Shut, given the strange sort of structure of the story, where the climax, you can argue that the climax is in the billiard room at the end, but the climax, the extravagant one, is like plop in the middle of Act 2.
I mean, do you
think he's doing something there?
I mean, you definitely feel its influence. I mean, we all grew up in a time when after this like movie came out, like actually got into movies. I want to clarify, because we're all born before this movie came out. But we grew up in a time where this is kind of like heavily influenced film culture. Because now you see a lot of movies where like a big element is revealed in the middle, but then it's kind of swept underneath the rug to feel like something less abstract or less kind of like as severe as you think. But then it still leaves room for like, well, is it? We're definitely in a post Eyes Wide Shut kind of influenced climate. I would argue. You just have to look at like any like modern thriller probably has some Eyes Wide Shut influences, or any modern thriller involving sex probably has some influence. I mean, in terms of like film pushing the film landscape, maybe. I mean, story structure like that's not like too unfamiliar, I think. I don't know what's your prompting for this question. What are you thinking, Mark?
Well, I'm very taken up with the idea of like film hasn't been pushed farther than it can be, and I'm very interested with filmmakers who try to do that. And I certainly would agree with the notion that 2001 pushed things very far.
Yep.
And I don't mean like in the sense of like influence, but in the sense of like how a film can be structured and coherent.
Yeah.
Because in Andrei Tarkovsky's book, Sculpting in Time, he makes the argument that like people are getting literature confused with cinema, and they're two very different things that need to be treated differently.
Yep.
And you can sort of see that in his films, the way that time is perceived through that. And Tarkovsky's obviously pushing something there that isn't fully realized, but he's trying to do something. And you certainly feel that in 2001. And I get the inkling of that feeling with this film, just the way that it's just with the big orgy in the middle.
Well, okay, so there's like a lot of different things you can go here. You can recognize that this movie does not feel like a interconnectivity between scenes. And I think that's purposeful. Like every single element, whether it's Tom Cruise walking through the streets or him kind of going to like the hookers or prostitutes room, to him going to the nightclub, all of it feels like its own distinct scene with its own distinct lighting and shots and everything like that. They feel like a bunch of slightly interwoven, interconnected vignettes, with the climax like vignette, be it pun intended, being like an hour and 15 minutes into the 2 hour and 15-minute movie. It's definitely like a weird kind of thing like that. But I mean, in terms of like nonlinear storytelling, you had Pulp Fiction that came out a few years ago. I mean, nonlinear is not something that's new. And I know this movie isn't nonlinear, but there's kind of that argument of like, if you take the typical how you create a story, where you have your first act kind of like climax, rising, falling action, or sorry, first act, rising action, climax, falling action, and then the ending. I mean, you could argue that it has that and then goes back up at the end. It's kind of like the two-pronged kind of thing. Matt, what do you think?
I don't really notice anything that's particularly groundbreaking that, changed the landscape of film in this movie. Like, I don't think it's the first movie to be like an erotic thriller. I don't think it's the first movie to have the climax and an unconventional point in the movie. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really agree with the idea of this being a super influential movie, because when I'm watching it, I didn't notice anything that was particularly even from like just Kubrick's other filmography. I found it to be at times to be one of like the lesser interesting ones. And I don't know. I don't know the history of film, but I don't think that this movie is quite as, I don't think it's really as, groundbreaking. I can't think of any director that's like cited on the top of my head that's cited Eyes Wide Shut specifically as like a huge influential film to them.
Yeah, I can understand that. What were you gonna say, Mark?
I think I don't know. Stanley was obsessed with the film form. I'm just trying to think, like, there is something about the film that invokes a feeling that I have seldom seen elsewhere in the history of cinema, and I'm having a hard time pinpointing that. I don't know if it's the atmosphere or the very meticulous lighting. Is it the fact that it's at Christmas? I can't figure out what it is about this film.
I can try to start with it. I can try to get
go
that.
for it.
Well, one, I think apparent right at the start is the fact that you go to Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. So, by the way, we haven't like even talked about specifics. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are like excellent in this movie. Nicole Kidman especially. She has a few moments.
I think Tom Cruise is fine.
You think he's fine? I think he serves the role. I don't think he's asking to do too much. I think he serves the role perfectly well. But I mean, they're opening apartment. The apartment looks like a dollhouse. It looks fake. It looks constructed. You don't really get a sense of any depth or dimension with any outside environment. You look outside their windows and when they're kind of like walking through, and it looks like directly plastered on. There's no like excess of like depth perception, which creates this very confined and controlled space, which, given the nature of what we end up finding out about the movie, might have some purpose, because everything is seemingly under control or manipulation by this collective elite of pervert sex people. But we can talk about that. But I think then you go to like any of the time he walks in the streets, and anytime he's walking, if you look at the Stanley Kubrick Chronicles, you see that a lot of it was shot on green screen, mixed in with like actual shots of like the city. But even the city looks like a set, and everything looks very specific and constructed, and it doesn't really feel like we're in the real world. And then you combine this with, you're right, this weird Christmas atmosphere, and like a very effective but simple score, and very unusual lighting, like distinct lighting. It creates this weird ambiance. You're like, this does not feel like the real world. And I think that's where you get that feeling of like, what feels off about this, and why do I get this weird feeling? I think it's because everything is meant to seem fake.
I think Well, let's look at the source material, which is Trom Novelle by
Yeah.
Arthur Schnitzler, and that was written in, I think, in the early 20th century or late 19th century, which takes place in Vienna with like a loosely similar plot. And let's focus on that title. The English translation is Dream Story. So there's obviously sequence. I mean, dreams are like the most important part of the film, where Nicole Kidman is like her faithfulness, I guess, to Tom Cruise is challenged by these dreams she's having. And also, and Tom Cruise is having images of that dream in his head. And I think it's like with Kubrick, everything in the shot is very deliberate. There's a reason why it's there. And so Tom Cruise walking on a green screen, or like the fake looking background, my interpretation of that is, when you're dreaming, you remember only certain things, but like not everything is like fine tuned or sharp.
Yep.
So there's certain elements that the blurring of corners can induce a dream-like state, I guess.
Yeah.
Like that's how I interpret the green screen walking down the street. Given Tom Cruise's mentality at the time, discovering that his wife has these thoughts, he's entering some sort of like different realm, I guess. And as well as like the shots of you can see the city skyline through the curtains in the apartment, which is obviously, it looks like a caricature of a building. So I think the dream sequences, the dream aspect is handled like so magnificently in this film that I think that might be what the source of the weird feelings are.
I want to say something real quick. Like there's something, because I think there's something that there's actual, basically there were 400 takes, different shots, different scenes of the movie, and it was purposely done because Kubrick wanted the actors to feel tired. He wanted there to be some weird blend between dreamlike and between dream and reality. So there are scenes with Cruise and Kidman that are like the 400 take, where the actors are like literally exhausted, and it contributes to that sort of detachment to what's going on. So there's an extreme commitment on Kubrick's part to this theme, or to this, I guess, theme of being in a dreamlike haze and not being able to tell reality from non-reality. And that stuff, although I admire the fact that he went to that extreme to get these shots, I'm not like 100% sure if it was totally satisfying for me, because personally, during a lot of the Kidman Tom Cruise scenes, I was like struggling to pay attention, maybe because the two actors don't have as much chemistry as, I don't know, but there is like this weird commitment on Kubrick's part to keep like this vision that he has, and I'm not 100% sure if it paid off in the end.
I do think, if we're kind of going with this idea of like it's supposed to be a dream, you often have, we have to probably address the fact that all the dialogue in this movie is delivered as slow as possible. And if you're someone who has never seen this movie, you have to be aware this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. And as good as the movie is, in my opinion, it feels like a 2 hours and 20-minute movie, because there are certain 6 to 8 minute sequences where Nicole Kidman is delivering dialogue as slow as possible. And it's meant to challenge. It's meant to kind of keep your attention and challenge you. I think that's clearly the point, because if Kubrick's as meticulous as we think, any specific line delivery is meant to be a kind of a something. If we're going back to like the idea of it like dream illusions, then often in dreams things go a lot slower, or things happen where things are perceived slower, which could make sense. But in terms of just general filmmaking, I definitely had issues at a certain point when you're like in 50 to 55 minutes in, and you're like, man, talk a little faster. Like, I know it's not like a big complaint, but I think I understand the point they're trying to go, but I think in terms of effectiveness, I kind of agree with that in some capacity. I'm probably about split in the middle there, where I'm like, yeah, the dialogue is difficult to keep attention at times.
Mm-hmm. The movie's weird because I was really not into it like the first hour or so. I was into it. I appreciated a lot of aspects of it. Is magnificently directed, clearly, and it's a Kubrick movie, so you're interested in seeing what's going on. But I sort of appreciate like the sort of how restrained he was, because when they get to the orgy, and then it all of a sudden just feels like a Kubrick movie.
Yeah.
Like the directing is more energetic. It's just a weird shit going on, and you're like, what is? And you're just wondering what's going on. There's so much intricate detail with the mask and everything, and all of a sudden the movie just opens up. So in that sense, it's worth it in a way. But I also don't think my biggest problem is I don't think that the whatever is going on here, this Illuminati orgy thing or whatever, what have you, is not explored enough in a satisfying way for me. And
Yeah.
I understand that the movie is more about its themes of. I mean, I watched a lot of video essays on the movie because it's obviously really in depth. Like, there's a lot of talking about prostitution, about like the detachment of sex in New York socialite society. But I kind of think the movie rests a little too much on its themes, and I would have liked to have seen some of the actual plot be explored more,
Yeah.
and some of the more mysteries be explored more.
What do you mean? I think everything is explained to a perfect T.
What I
But
mean is that I just personally would have wanted to see. I don't want the whole Illuminati thing to be explained to me, but I would have liked to have seen just more of it. You know, because we look at other Kubrick films. You have Clockwork Orange, which is a weird movie in its own right, but like it has its themes, and the themes stand for something. But there's also like a thorough like exploration of this world in the same time. And the same thing with The Shining. Like The Shining, there's a ton of mystery that's never explained, and I'm okay with it. But I feel like whatever The Shining is you're given enough detail of it that I found a satisfying way. In addition to the themes where of domestic abuse and whatever. But I think that I just wanted one more step into this cult thing going on. I didn't want the whole thing explained to me, but I wanted just a little bit more from it. It just kind of felt like not thrown in, but I didn't think that the core relationship between Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise was interesting enough to make me not wonder more about the cult thing.
I think I fall in between you two on this one a little bit. I definitely
Mhm.
don't think it's all perfectly touched on in a T, but I think that might be the point. But I also think there's a lot of, in terms of like, if we're talking about solely the explanation of like what the fuck is happening, I think there's a lot more there than maybe what's going on, and maybe that's a benefit of like a second rewatch of watching it through again and being like, okay, I know what to look for, blah blah blah, kind of stuff like that. But I mean, there's like a certain, like, we're viewing things from Bill's perspective, and he's entering a world in which he's not socially, like, economically, like, available to enter, despite the fact that we look at him and we're like, you're extremely wealthy. It's like this detachment between wealthy and like wealthy, elite wealthy. And he is not bored of that gap, and therefore, like, what we get is like the explanations enough to, like, to me it's like to serve it, to satisfy like a dancing monkey to them. Like, oh man, this dancing monkey poses like a threat to potentially like screw us over. Let's satisfy the dancing monkey with this, like, maybe correct explanation, maybe, who knows. That's where I kind of landed on it after a second rewatch. I don't know, what do you think, Mark? Because you said it was like
Um,
perfect to a T, and I'm curious about that.
I think the whole cult aspect, I think, is dealt. I wanted no more and no less.
Hmm.
And also with the billiard scene at the end, where Sidney Pollock's character is it's sort of explained to Tom Cruise, but not really.
It's explained from the perspective of someone who's part of the cult, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep.
Well, yes, yes. So it's hard to tell what is.
It's like he's like basically being served propaganda, and you're not like from my interpretation, you're not supposed to take it 100% seriously.
Yeah, I think that's the
Yeah,
point of the movie, is you're supposed to
yeah.
question every single word he's saying, or whether or not it's true. Because who knows
Yes.
if Bill like made it back? You never find out what happened to like a character. So we should probably clarify a little bit. Bill is the one who basically introduces Tom Cruise's character to it. He's a piano player. Bill's who
Yeah.
gets Tom Cruise in the party, and then we later find out that Bill was taken to his apartment and checked out with a black eye.
Nick. It was Nick.
Nick,
Bill
I'm
is Tom
sorry.
Cruise.
I'm sorry about that. Nick, that's my bad. And Nick was taken away with a black eye, and that's it. We never actually know what happens to Nick, but Sidney Pollock's character is even like, yeah, it's probably a lot less than he deserves, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So you're like, something slipped there a little bit.
And he's also
Okay.
investigating the prostitute who
Yep.
saved Bill's life, and then who
I wanna
OD'd
talk about
earlier
that.
in the movie. And
Yep.
he's like, oh, well, she OD'd once, she could OD again. You don't know. That's how she died. So there's
Well-
purposeful gray area.
Let's talk about that part. That there's a lot of ambiguity there that I picked up on the first time. So
Okay.
we meet that the prostitute, as she's so called, at the beginning, and she's OD'd. Bill saves her life. Later on in the film, he shows up at the house. Turns out the prostitute's there, and she's dressed up in the mask in the ritual, and later on we find out she's dead in the hotel.
Yeah.
So let's look what happened in the hotel. So what Sidney Pollock's character said, I forget what his character's name is, but he says it was all staged, that whole charade he calls it, and then she went back to her hotel and then she OD'd, and there's no malice about it. Now I can believe the charade because when she takes Tom Cruise aside, a person in the house, like one of the henchmen, pulls her up to a second story. I can probably see them saying like, okay, you need to put this thing on to get him out of here.
Yep.
And then, the charade commences. But what doesn't satisfy me, what isn't explained, is why she went to him in the first place.
Or there's an element when in Pollock's explanation where he's like, the door was locked from the inside, which I don't think is something that you'd probably gather from like a newspaper. There's like a few, like I completely agree that they're like, it's meant to be like, what's going on? What you're talking about, why the prostitute went to Bill in the first place?
Yes, because I can understand the charade. I can believe that. And I
Yep.
can understand that she OD'd, but why she went to him in the first place? She knew Bill. I don't know how she would have known him through the mask, but she clearly recognized that here's a stranger to this whole thing.
Yep.
And out of the goodness of her heart, I presume she wanted to warn them. And then the henchman comes and says, like, come with me. And
maybe the orgy was just a dream. It's all part of Bill's fantasy.
Bill's sexual repressed fantasy or whatever it is.
Yes.
I like if we're talking about like actual like conspiracy theory, I mean, I again, this is the issue, is like we could dive into hours about like the minutia. I mean, Matt even mentioned the fact that he watched video essays, but it could really one of those things of just like, I imagine to this elitist club, there is no difference between Bill and that prostitute. And I think there's supposed to be some kind of commentary in there, like there's a distinct difference between Bill's social class and the prostitute's social class. And then there's a distinct difference between Bill and the elite, but to the elite, Bill and the prostitute are one and the same. At least that's when I watch it. I'm like, there's probably this like unified like commentary about the fact that like we have like
it's a class conscious film.
I think there's elements of it. Yeah, absolutely. At least that's what I got on a second watch. I got more of a like repressed sexuality, class conscious film on the second watch through than anything else.
Wouldn't they not be one the same because they let Bill give Bill a warning, whereas they just kind of kill the prostitute?
But
because he's a higher class, that's the class. That's
but
the
thing I still
think
think
higher class.
Probably, but I still think there's like the dancing monkey element of like, I feel like we're arguing between like lower class, upper middle class, and like billionaire. I feel like it's like there's a distinct difference between lower class and upper middle class, let's say, and then the billionaire. And I feel like that's the difference we're talking about, where we can see like Bill, like what is like a few things we know about Bill. He's rich enough and successful enough to afford like a penthouse apartment in like Manhattan, or like an apartment that is like, you look at it and you're like, holy, like any one of us can look at it and be like, I can never afford that in my entire life. Holy crap. But he still is someone who like walks around New York City, goes to like, I know this is gonna sound like, I'll explain in a second, but goes to like coffee shops, goes to these kind of things. He is constantly doling out money throughout the entire thing. So there's juxtaposition where he's taking taxis, he's doing all this kind of stuff. He's doing stuff that like the people who like the working class have to do, but he's constantly like throwing around money, which shows this lack of care. And then he shows up to the rich elite party in like a taxi. And that's ultimately like a thing that probably gives him away, is like the fact that it shows up in a taxi to this elite thing. And I think there's this definite element of like, look at him in the working class environment. Look how he just throws money away. He's like, here's $100, whatever. Yeah, sure. And then he goes to that element and he's in a taxi and he's completely out of his element. At least
there's also like him showing his lawyer, his doctor certificate, like it's a detective badge in front of like the middle class people, lower class people, like, oh, look at me, I can do whatever I want with this.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a doctor,
I'm a doctor,
and they're like,
let me go through. And then obviously it means nothing to the billionaires.
Yeah,
like almost strip him naked. That's how little they think of him.
Yeah, it's like, take your clothes off or we'll do it for you. And it's just like, they might have, like, you never know. I think they're like, what do you think, Mark? Because you seem you seem a little bit mixed on this.
Well, certainly there's class consciousness and there's things to be said there, but I want to talk about, like, Matt, you made a comment. You said you didn't believe the Nicole Kidman Tom Cruise relationship.
Yeah.
You didn't believe that?
I mean, I just said I didn't find their chemistry to be particularly engaging.
Engaging. Yeah. Well, I think what Kubrick
With
had
the
in
knowledge
mind
that it
with,
took them that they were doing some of them are 400 takes in, so
Yeah.
keep that
Yeah.
in mind.
I don't know. I think I never had that belief. I think the film obviously tests your patience with the way that Nicole Kidman speaks, but I wouldn't say I was not engaged. I found it to be pretty engaging, especially the first argument when they're after they were smoking weed, um, and the way that escalated. But I don't know. I think I think the purpose of the film is like I think like men and women and their relationships and the lies they tell each other and like fidelity and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Fidelio.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a very interesting exploration of that topic. I have
Ye-
not seen that in any other film.
There is a definite like I mean Kubrick was purposeful trying to find a married couple because there's a certain element of like comfortability and like lack of sexuality and sexualness in this movie between Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise. Like you're constantly seeing Nicole Kidman like exposed, like naked, but there's never any like
That's the first shot of the movie.
It's like exactly, it's the first shot of the movie. But the only time you see Nicole Kidman placed in any sexual situations, or even Tom Cruise, is when they're with other people. I mean, that opening dinner party, Nicole Kidman's like flirting with this like really suave old man, and Tom Cruise is flirting with these two younger girls. But then you put them together, and they're basically like naked around each other, but there's almost like this devoid lack of sexualness between them. And it's I think that's incredibly purposeful to maybe it's Kubrick's commentary on like relationships or something like that. I don't know, but there like I was watching it, and when I mentioned like repressed sexuality, that's what I kind of mentioned is there's always sex around Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, but not when they're together.
Have you seen the trailers for this movie?
I have not. No.
It's like marketed as like this erotic thriller with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
And yeah,
I think that's why the reviews are so negative. Well, not like super negative, but like relative to a Kubrick film on
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes, because like just watch the trailer because it's playing like some like rock and roll song, and it's like all the scenes of them like naked together.
oh my
It's
god,
like it's like coming this summer, an erotic thriller, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman,
oh.
and obviously they barely touch each other once.
Yeah, they barely.
Well, I'll tell
Yeah.
you, the marketing worked because this thing like did super well.
Yeah,
in the
it's
box
like it
office.
made like
I mean, they were like the
$150 million.
couple at the time, right? So
Yeah, and I mean Tom Cruise is also he's like Mark said, he's a mega star by this point. But I mean, we could talk about like specifics. Like we mentioned the orgy scene, but I want to, and Matt, you guys have briefly touched on it, but it's one of the more. There is one shot in this movie that is one of the most effective shots I've seen in a movie ever, and it's the iconic. Hey, your taxi, your driver's here, and he wants to talk to you, and then he walks through a door, and it's just hard cut to the music to everyone looking at him is one of the most effective shots in a movie, like out there. Just is.
I would have to agree. That transition is That transition is literally horrifying.
Yeah.
there's that like singular piano playing the ding ding.
Yeah,
like,
and it
all
holds
that
and then
stuff.
the two guys in the purple suits are standing there, and everybody's staring, and then you get the close-up shots of all the masks, and it's like as if like the screen painting came to life.
Yeah, it's legitimately like I'm always hesitant to say the word a masterpiece shot, but in terms of this context, it's legitimately one of the best shots ever put to film.
I do like the first shot of that scene when he's walking in and they're doing the ritual with the incense.
Yeah,
and he's like saying some language that I didn't know. I don't know if it's Latin or something, but like that whole Kubrick is so good at just shooting like mysterious things.
Yeah,
and you're just constantly questioning what's going on. And in that shot too with the taxi, like I did not see that coming. I was like, oh, they're gonna give him like a warning or something, tell him to kick him out.
Yeah,
and like I knew it wasn't like actually a tax. I knew that I thought just gonna kick him out or something. But the hard cut to everyone just staring at him, and then they're like, and then they're questioning him. And I mean, Cruise, I was kind of criticizing his performance early, but Tom Cruise does a good job with his voice of like showing his fear through the mask.
Yep.
So that stuff is really good as well.
Did you? I'm curious what you thought, Matt, on a first watch through, like cut to that shot, because that's like the shot in the movie.
That's definitely when I started to warm up to the movie. That whole sequence, I was like, okay, this is really getting interesting. This is like the Kubrick I was expecting more.
The second half of this movie is phenomenal, by the way. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah,
I really
the whole paranoia thing, and just to draw a quick comparison, you can tell we're talking about inspiration. You can tell Sam Esmail and Mr. Robot is very inspired by like not so much like the orgy part, but like shooting of people wearing masks. Like that's so prevalent in Mr. Robot, and I definitely saw the influence there. And I don't know, like that stuff is really good. And I just wanted I wanted more of it without wanting things to be explained to me. I just wanted more scenes in that sort of environment.
What do you think of the second half, Mark?
Well, I want to talk about the scene in the house, the orgy house. I think there are certain moments in certain films where I feel like the film has taken me hostage and I can't look away.
Yep.
And I've never felt that stronger than when Tom Cruise enters that house and you see like the ritual happening.
Yep.
It's impossible to pull your eyes from the screen. And every room he enters, it's like, oh God, what fucked up shit is he gonna find now?
Yep. And
then to get that culminated to the fact that he walks in and everybody's staring at him, it is terrifying. That build up to that scene is just incredible.
Yeah. Long tracking shots. Yeah.
Yes, the long tracking shots. Oh, and I also want to pivot a little bit here, but I was paying attention to the way the scenes were shot, specifically with Tom Cruise in the first half. And it's got, I don't know what the lens is called. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly got like almost like a fisheye lens to it almost. And it's slightly where it's got this weird, like, globular sort of view. And it tracks Tom Cruise as he enters a room and like goes behind him. And there's all these tracking shots. And I cannot remember for the life of me how he's shot in the second half of the film. Do you guys remember? Is there a distinct change in the way he is shot?
It's
after that event.
I think the cuts are a little more rapid. I think you're dealing with now paranoia aspect of it.
Uh-huh.
That's funny. I noticed more tracking shots in the second half.
Really?
In the second
walking along the streets.
The
single piano playing as like the sign of the cult being having a presence around. I noticed a lot more tracking shots.
I remember seeing. I feel like I remember a lot more cuts, but still, it's
not be on your phone as much.
I wasn't on my phone. You're fine. Let's go.
You just turn the lights off when you left.
Yeah.
I must say,
turn the lights off.
The lights are off for the orgy scene, but there's again like I was a little when I was the cut to it. I was like, the lights. So can you turn these on?
Unbelievable.
Hey, listen, it's freaky. Like I don't know, it's freaky. No, I mean, in terms of like the second half, I mean, lighting is far more specific. In the second half, you get these like Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise are often like bathed in hues of blue. It's like a very distinct thing. But that Nicole Kidman sequence where she basically is laughing in her dream and then wakes up and then for 8 minutes tells Tom Cruise about how she was getting fucked by a bunch of different guys. And it's just like bathed in hue. And you cut back to Tom Cruise, who looks like his world's falling apart. He has really great like facial acting in this. I want to throw out there. I've never really figured anointed him as like a really good like facial expression actor, but like the hard cuts to him like looking like he's falling apart, which is probably in tune with like the 400 takes, is like excellent. I know you said, Matt, you thought Tom Cruise was fine. I mean, this clearly isn't like he's not being showy. He's not standard Tom Cruise in this movie in the slightest. He actually has to be really restrained, which for the I'm gonna say like the cult pun intended of Tom Cruise, the personality of Tom Cruise is not that. And it's very interesting to watch him like hold back for this movie and like restrain who his character is, who he is. I thought it was impressive. I don't know. I'm a Tom Cruise guy. Like I just am.
That's just so funny where it's like like Tom Cruise is just such an unpredictable character. It's like, oh man, look how restrained he is. Look, he's so great.
He's not overacting.
He's not yelling at his crew about not following COVID guidelines.
Hey, that was awesome. All right, don't that was the best thing of fucking COVID was Tom Cruise yelling.
It's really funny though to think that Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise can be in this movie, and then also Nicole Kidman can be in Just Go With It with Adam Sandler, and Tom Cruise can be in the Mummy remake.
Yep.
Too. And it's like these is like it's like a complete opposite end of the spectrum of movie quality.
God, Tom Cruise has worked with Scorsese, Kubrick, PTA. Who else?
You look at his film. He's worked with. Hasn't he worked with? He's worked with
John Woo. He's worked with Brad Bird. He's worked with.
Hold on, let's look it up real quick. I just it's one of those things where you just watch this movie and it's one of the like I miss movies like this. Like I just want to this feels like a movie that is specifically in its era and something we don't get much anymore. Like a very clearly like meticulous well
So I
crafted
want
movie.
more. You want more orgies? Is that it?
Yeah, I want more weird sex orgies. Tom Cruise has
Apparently, the
worked
movie was
with
supposed to be NC-17, but like the rating police stopped it.
They
The
did.
rating.
They did by adding like CGI cloaked figures in the house.
Did they?
Yeah, it's in the Kubrick archives.
I don't remember seeing that.
The,
Scene
the
17 one.
tracking shots of the house during the orgy. There was a lot more shown, but the MPAA said you need to like cover some of this. so we're gonna have to cut
MPAA.
this.
It's the MPAA. I've never heard someone say the MPAA.
It's the MPAA. I've just
MPAA.
decreed that's what it is.
Do you guys like? I know Matt, you're probably like, shut up, I gotta go. But I just
You
have
wrap
a,
it
like,
up.
I have like, I just like one more is the idea of. I just want to touch on that a little more. Is the idea of like this movie is one that when Kubrick died, we kind of just lost like this kind of movie, and it's one that like this movie I don't think has like aged. No, has aged well, I should say. I think it has. It's what like I'm watching it and I'm like I don't feel like this is a movie that it was made what 20 years
It
ago.
feels like a movie that could come out conceivably at any time.
And
like
yeah,
post color in movies, I would suppose.
yeah. And I just want to say that I like it's a shame. Like watching this, I'm like, man, I wish movies were more like this. And I understand, you know, they change and movies progress, stuff like that. But this just feels like it was like the end of like, I mean, it was in '99, like the end of the '80s and '90s, like erotic thrillers that are like
It's
perfectly
weird to think
crafted.
that Kubrick, like this is like his last movie was Full Metal Jacket, other than like before this movie. It's
Yeah.
like I wonder like what he was doing
For
during
12
like, those
years.
12 years.
Yeah.
that, like
Well,
I wonder if he has like manuscripts that no one has seen or something like that.
There
Probably
are.
knows about
There's
this.
the Napoleon manuscript, which was supposed to be the film after 2001.
Yeah.
That was like a full-fledged film. Like there's like a gigantic, there's like probably like a whole like vault of pre-production that Kubrick did. Then there was the Aryan Papers, the Holocaust film he was going to do. But I think that they changed the title to something else. And then there was the AI film.
Yeah, I just
And-
wonder why. I just wonder why he wasn't making more movies. I know this movie took multiple years to make, but it just seems like a pretty large gap.
He's
I
that
thi-
kind
I
of
think-
director who probably just picked like he's like I will make a movie when I want to make a movie. I mean, by what 90? By the time he's that age, he's Kubrick. I mean, he's made like every influential movie, and all of his movies are massively influential. He could make whatever he wanted. He had that blank check kind of aspect to him. So he's like, I'll make one when I want.
Yeah, I mean, all of his, except for like the first few films he did,
I still haven't
Uh,
seen Barry Lyndon or Killer's Kiss or Lolita, but my least favorite of his is probably The Killer, or Killers or whatever it is.
Killing.
Killing. Thank you. Because that just feels like a director who's like starting. It just does.
Yeah. But the thing about Kubrick is all of his films are adaptations. He was not
Path of Glory?
Path of Glory was an adaptation.
Strangelove.
Strangelove, yes, was an adaptation of a book called Red Alert.
Really? What? 2001 one was 2001 was.
Well,
one.
that was technically
They're written
Arthur C.
simultaneously.
they
Yeah.
were written simultaneously, and Clockwork Orange, obviously Anthony Burgess, Barry Lyndon, William Makepeace Thackeray, The Shining, Stephen King, Full
Yep.
Metal Jacket. I can't remember what the name of the book is. I don't know if it's of the same name, but it is adapted. And then Eyes Wide Shut is Trom Novelle.
That's actually. I had
and-
no idea all of his movies were that, and Lolita is Lolita. So
Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea. That's
Nabokov.
actually really interesting.
So I guess he was just waiting for the right book to come along, I guess. Yeah. Also, for literary references in this film, Ovid is mentioned in the first.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember that.
Ovid, the Roman poet Ovid, wrote a set of poems called Ars Armatoria, which is like the art of love. And now they were like all the rage in Rome at the time. And and this is brought up in the film, Ovid was exiled because of he was close friends with, I believe, the emperor at the time. I think it was Augustus. And he was like the most famous poet in Rome at the time. So like, he was loved by everybody, and he was sent into exile because of something he saw and because of something he said. And so the Emperor Augustus sent him into exile by the Black Sea.
Yep.
And that's brought up in the film, his exile.
Oh,
Does that-
okay?
I mean, Kubrick
It's
Kubrick
perfect. I mean, all
is deliberate
anytime
on everything.
there's a painting in a scene, a painting always means something. I mean, there's always that too.
Yeah. I think
Um,
his wife painted a lot of the paintings in the film.
Okay, that's actually kind of cool.
Christiana. Yeah.
Oh, I know Matt's like squirming to see because he wants to leave. But
Yeah, he
I
hates
just want to say
us.
we gotta end this with our final. Would you recommend this? Do you want people to spend their time on this? I know for me, it's a Kubrick. I don't think any of Kubrick's movies are not like they're all worth your time because it's Kubrick. I mean, I think he's kind of that one director out of many who you're just like, yeah, watch all his movies. Like, I don't really like. He's Kubrick. He's one of the most influential, if not the most influential director ever. Watch his movies, even if this one's not as good as his other ones. It's still Kubrick movie. Go watch it.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it as much, but I would still recommend watching it because it's Kubrick. You know, you're gonna get something out of it at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go for the name.
And the talent.
I was
Obviously, he's talented.
Also, I was just thinking, like, I think it's funny how we do the recommendations at the end, even though the people who are probably still watching have watched the film.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're gonna recommend the film to people who've already watched
Yeah,
it.
I do recommend the movie. We spoiled the crap out of. Of course we do.
I would recommend it. Obviously, it's Kubrick. I give the same answer as my comrades.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, well, next time at the start we'll be like, if it's a movie we don't like, be like, don't watch this, and then they'll leave.
Yeah.
So
Is next week our Rashomon Persona?
next week is High and Low.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay.
Oh boy, I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
That one's
Kurosawa.
that's a Kurosawa High and Low, which gives me an excuse to finally watch a few of his movies this week.
Watch Ron.
I'll try to watch Ron. Okay.
Watch Akiru. Watch it.
I'll watch Akira too. I gotta watch a few of them. I'll try to tackle one or two this week before we start and watch High and Low. But yeah, that was fun, guys. Thank you guys for coming. Next week will be High and Low, and then we'll do our Rashomon and Persona, stuff like that. And then we'll probably have to recoup and figure out a few. Because by that point I will no longer be on my state. So we'll figure that out, stuff like that. But
In your state, not on your state.
no, I'll no longer be in my state. What did I say?
Yeah. English
Okay.
major.
Fuck you. All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. And how do I end this thing? And I get the final word. Goodbye.